Welcome to SolFul Connections, where we skip the small talk and head right into the soul talk. I'm Amanda Solar, and each week we share the kinds of stories that remind us we're not alone. It's about being human, raw and unfiltered, just real talk. Let's connect.
Connection. Let's talk about connection.
So I am here with Dr. Andrea Simon, who I call Andi. I'm so excited to talk to you, Andi. I will tell you off the bat that I just have so much respect for you. We go back a little ways because when I was at the chamber, you came in and helped us to really shape some strategic changes we needed to make. And I've just always found you so extraordinarily intelligent and articulate and fascinating. So thank you for coming
You're
on
setting
today.
up a very high bar for today for a conversation.
No pressure. You are a corporate anthropologist. So could you talk a little bit about what that is and how you came to be an anthropologist at all?
Well, there are two related questions, but not identical ones. So let me take the first part. Like so many people, you go off to college without a clear direction. My father only warned me to be irresponsible. It was the last time I could be irresponsible. And as I was taking my courses, I came upon an anthropology course, and boy, did it just hit me right. I can't even tell you why, but it was one of those transformational moments. And I left Penn State, where I was an undergraduate, came back to Columbia to take my anthropology, and then went right in for my doctorate at City University. I was a classical anthropologist. I was studying Greek immigrants and return migration. Became a professor at Ramapo College, now Ramapo University in New Jersey. And I got my tenure, I got my dissertation done, I had a postdoc at Penn. And by chance, I like chance, my husband was an executive at Citibank. And during deregulation, and I'll date myself, in the early 1980s, they had a cocktail party, and my husband and I, who's also named Andi, went. So Andi and I went and we're talking to people, and they said, would you like to come and help us change? And I went, I can do that. Not knowing anything about banking or deregulation or any of the nuances of the industry. But I took a year off from the university and I became a consultant. Now, I must tell you that they thought of an anthropologist however they thought about it, because I really didn't know what they thought about it, but I wasn't quite sure what they were looking for either, other than a fresh perspective on how to take all their service folks who came to work from 9 to 12 and 1 to 3, and if they didn't steal, they were there forever. And now they wanted them to sell and take care of cross-sell and to do a whole different world.
Oh.
And so once I spent some time at Citi, I got recruited to Poughkeepsie Savings Bank. I was their SVP, and I bought their first computers, launched their first ATM, and I became. Now, this is so interesting because Poughkeepsie is an hour from my house north, and Citibank is an hour from my house south. But you would think that 2 hours they were in two different worlds. And it was most interesting for me. Anthropology is about observation. It's about really getting into the world that you are understanding or working in or studying. It's not knowing necessarily. It's beginning to understand how others are really living in their community, what their culture is like, what their behaviors are like, what they believe, and they do it through telling you their stories. So I spent some time in banking, first at Poughkeepsie, then at another bank, and then I got into healthcare during managed care. Now, if there's a theme here, when things are changing, I'm happy. When things are changing, everyone else is awful. And
Yes.
they don't know how to change. They don't even find that being curious about it is a value. This is not the way we've done it. That's true, but that's not going to happen anymore. Now you're going to do it in a new way. Well, I don't know how to do that. And so I began to hone my skills at how do you lead organizations through transformation. And I learned that it's painful. The brain hates you. It doesn't want to change. It wants to create all kinds of cortisol that says, fly away from her, fear her, don't touch her. So after 7 years in healthcare and 14 years in banking, after 9/11, I launched my business. So it's almost 24 years ago. And I went to my PR firm and I said to John Rossica, I said, John, okay, who am I? What's the story? I said, I can go this way, I can go that way. He said, no, you're a corporate anthropologist that helps companies change. And I went, bingo. Now the question is from you, what's a corporate anthropologist? I must say, it's an imagination from my PR person's mind about how do you concretize what the work is that someone does when they apply anthropology to business. Now, some people say, I thought anthropologists study small scale societies. And I said, what makes you think a business isn't a small scale society? Think about it.
Yeah.
Think about the rites of passage. Think
Yeah.
about how people become part of the group or the community or the culture. Think about how two companies will merge and you'll find that they were doing similar things, if not identical ones, in completely different ways. The human being is a meaning maker. We create all kinds of different explanations for the stories that we live. Now, when you push two companies together, you have chaos because they will believe that they did things well before, but you don't want them to do that anymore. We worked for the Cleveland Clinic, for example, and helping them through culture change. And they were acquiring other hospitals who thought they had a perfectly fine culture. And they weren't quite sure what the Cleveland Clinic culture was, but we were supposed to embrace it. But what was it? And this becomes part of the joy of being able to provide a new perspective for folks who are going through something that's being mandated, but not terribly understood without a process. Culture change is a process that requires great transformation of behaviors and beliefs and routines and relationships and the way we do things here. So it's pretty profound. So I've had a great time. I picked up clients right away, a university, a healthcare client, manufacturing clients. My first book called On the Brink, A Fresh Lens to Take Your Business to New Heights is all about 8 of our clients who were stuck or stalled and needed a little anthropology to see what was all around them. And often I just say to them, the future is all around you. You just can't see it. It's a long trip that I've had, and I have enjoyed every minute of it. But I am a corporate anthropologist that helps companies change. I believe that's a good short story.
I do too. And I have to tell you, I'm sitting about 5 minutes from Margaret Mead's house.
Are you really?
I really am. I pass her house almost every day. And it makes me think though, you know, really being an anthropologist and even studying anthropology, I can't remember anybody talking about that to me when I was like in high school.
Yeah.
So it makes me kind of wonder, Andi, what were you like as a little kid? Were you curious? Like what was your childhood like?
Well, who remembers? But so I guess if I could tell you, I guess 3 things. One of which my folks were in a family firm in the retail business in Manhattan near Columbia. And from the time I can remember being 4 or 5 years old, I was putting shirts on hangers with Leo in the basement, getting the merchandise up to the store. As I grew up, I wasn't aware of it, but I was being groomed or trained to take on the business at some point. And and as I grew up, I realized that yeah, I could do this, but I didn't really like doing it. And I would go out into the market with my grandmother and my mother to buy. And I once asked my grandmother, "How do you know what to buy?" "Well, Andrea, 1/3 will sell full price. 1/3 will go on sale, and 1/3 will walk out the door. Now, if you buy right, you'll get enough income to make a living."
Wow.
And I went, "Oh, there's a lot of science here, isn't there?" Merchandising with them. And so I grew up there. The second thing is that I was always curious, and I was told by my mother, mothers do leave lingering values.
Yeah.
Andrea, I don't really care what other people think. I care what you think. When you're a
Hmm.
kid, you don't really know what you think.
Yeah.
And we are biased or informed or really created by the folks we hang around with who help us think.
Yeah.
And that social talk or thinking biases you in different directions. but
Yeah.
being reinforced around, I don't care what others think, I want to know what you think,
Yep.
created a bit of anxiety because I had to now be very intentional about what I would think about, what I believe to be good. And so you become a little more of an independent than you are a team player or a part of a community, because the communities weren't always happy with a free thinker. And the free thinker wasn't always happy with the communities. And so it was always so interesting. And my last part of the story is that when I went off to college, my father said, "It's the last time you're going to be irresponsible." And I didn't have a clue what that meant, but I really thrived. I became president of my sorority. The woman who couldn't be part of a group wanted to lead the group. I ran for women's students president. We actually had women's student president office. And I was involved in the theater. I was involved in a homecoming. I mean, we were out there with Joe Paterno and the football team, things I never would have thought of myself at. But I had matured to the point where I was gambling that I was free from
Yeah.
having to be responsible back to my parents and have a point of view of my own. And it was a really interesting transformation. And then I met my husband and we moved back to New York and we moved into the next stage in our career. But your question is a really profound one because those are highlights, as you and I were talking. They're the
Yes.
things that sort of you remember because they were meant to be remembered.
Yeah.
You know, they're the
Yeah.
memories of the actions. There's the stories that you hear but don't really understand fully. I think growing up is a really treacherous time for a child. We're not quite sure what to do, but we're trying to be good.
I read somewhere it's the shortest part of our lives, and we spend our entire life kind of unpacking it in a way,
That is a big idea. I
right?
never thought of that, but it's true.
Well, and it goes back to what you just said a little bit. You said something about um, being a human being is a meaning maker. So it's that too. It's kind of like defining your life and finding the threads. And so, can I ask, was that a hard conversation when you told your parents, well, I'm not going to be doing the business? Or did you just kind of never mention it?
Well, I had met my husband to be. I'd moved to Colombia. I was living at
Okay.
home.
Right.
And I sort of was moving into a doctoral program, and I was really happy. And it was not a catastrophic meeting. It was simply a statement of, and my grandmother said, "What?" And I said, "Yes." And that was the end of it.
Yeah.
It was okay to be responsible for yourself. And I must tell you that as I have matured over the years, I'm becoming more and more comfortable being me and less worrisome about pleasing what other people are putting into me into boxes.
Yeah.
Because I do think over time, I've been SVP of a bank and EVP of a bank and the head of this here and
Yeah.
launching a business. And how many identities do we have?
Right.
We finally come to terms with our personal one, which is the one that you're most comfortable with.
Right. And I mean, yeah. And honestly, I think there's a little bit of evolution that's happening
Yes.
probably until we take our last breath, if we're doing it right. Um, or at least if we're doing it right, in my opinion.
But
um,
that's really, you're absolutely right about being right. I embrace change with great joy. And, somebody said, what season are you in? I said, well, I'm not in winter. I'm in spring. I like
right.
the stuff that comes at the beginnings. I like dawn. I mean, my
Yeah.
nature is to see what's new and find ways to embrace it, figure it out. It gives me a mental challenge and a business one too. I love it.
Andy, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking, I'm a person that likes change and I embrace change. And then I started thinking and I thought, hmm, I worked for the same company for over 30 years. I'm married to the person that I met when I was 21. My best friend, we decided to be best friends in first grade. I've lived in my house for almost 20 years and I thought maybe I don't like change.
But you're such a reflective person that you can begin to understand the things in different places.
Yeah.
Maybe the anchors that you have give you the freedom to see things that are new and different. Because just think about soulful. What a
Yeah.
big idea. And it's very personal and it's very, very much on brand. It's who you are.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I do think that all gives me a framework for being, liberated enough to change. And also, I think that I'm not always great at recognizing where I could stand to grow a little bit. So I think it's like probably both. Um,
Remember, it's not personal. The brain doesn't like change.
the brain doesn't like change, yet you're going into companies and you're talking about change,
Yeah.
which in some ways makes you, I hate to put it this way, but a little bit of the enemy in a strange
I
way.
am. You have no idea. They put me in a closet, lock the door, and say, hiring you is all we're going to change. And I said, okay.
Yes.
And I had one
Yeah.
client, 3 months into our stuff, he hadn't changed anything. I said, you do need to change something. But why? I said, because you want to change your organization. So I have to change? Well, if you don't lead, they will not follow you. Nobody is going to give up what they always do in order to be different, not knowing what you mean by the word different. I can only tell you, you go into a company to help them respond to poor sales or, top product not selling. And the first thing they say to you is, well, we don't do it that way. I said, yeah, I know. That's why it's not selling. Uh, well, what could we do that would help you, change? The reason I love
Yeah.
Blue Ocean Strategy so much is that it gives you a process for processing the things you have to do to move in a new direction. And
Right.
it gives them some comfort that there's format here as opposed to just anecdotes. So,
Yeah.
but it is not easy doing what we do, right?
Right. So is there, I mean, I know it's a big subject, but whittling it down, is there something or one of the things that makes change more palatable? Is there anything that
Well,
somebody
let's see. Call it a pandemic.
Yeah, right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, yeah.
So think about what happened with the pandemic or 2008 with the crash of the banks. I mean,
Yes.
cataclysms are like volcanic explosions for
Yeah.
people, and some people thrived and some people didn't. And coming back to work, some are going back to what they thought was there, finding it
Right.
wasn't. But I will tell you one of the things that we've learned. Marilyn Wright Edelman, who founded the Children's, I want to say the Children's Health Fund, but it's not. But she said, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And
Yeah.
the way the brain works is it has to see what
Yeah.
you're talking about, not hear it. And so I often have people start with drawing where they are today as a picture of today's reality and talking about it. The story is powerful. So you draw the story and you talk about it and you begin to understand why it's good and why it's not working.
Yeah.
Okay, now if you could transform this into something you think would work, what would it look like? And they know. And they draw, and I love it doing a big post-its, and they draw out these wonderful pictures, and they tell great stories about the house. They would be typical. I work with a cement company in Mexico, and they wanted to become more collaborative and creative. And the problem was they were very siloed, and the rules ruled, and nobody talked to each other outside of each of the divisions. I said, so what would be one thing that would be collaborative, maybe even a little creative or innovative? Well, I said, well, maybe if we had a meeting across the silos about a new customer and developed a process together as opposed to everybody doing their own thing. Well, that's not the way we do it. I said, I know, but that's what you said. You want to be more collaborative and not so competitive. And so it became really interesting because they could know they wanted to, but the
Right.
idea of doing it required behavior change. So what will we
Which
do
is
in a
cool.
meeting together? I said, okay, now everybody will come with the problems to be solved and the ideas about how to do it, and then we will have a group to synthesize it and put the I mean, you've got to have action to have change.
Yeah.
But you can imagine a place that was, on the one hand, successful, but not going to make it through the next generation. They couldn't hold on any staff. All the youngers who came left. They didn't want to work in silos.
And with a company, I almost think it would be just so much harder, even than personally, you know, um, because there are so many different people and entities, in a sense, riding on it. I think about that Japanese word kaizen, like those small incremental. That's what always gets me happy about change. I think, well, I don't have to revolutionize. I just have to move a little bit in the right direction.
You just need to know what direction is.
Well, that's true.
And if you don't have a destination, even if it's not the final, then you don't know if your steps or your small wins are moving you someplace good.
Oh my gosh. That's a really good point too. That's a
And so
real
that's why when you draw a picture of where you're going to go, okay, let's backward plan it. And if you're going to get there in a year, in 9 months, what have you achieved in 12, in 6 months, and in 3 months? And then what are the small wins and how are you going to celebrate them? Because the mind remembers what you celebrate.
Oh, nice. I like that.
Hmm.
I'm going to take that into my world, Andi. Speaking of you talked about the pandemic and catastrophic kind of changes and those kind of volcanic changes that make us like they're just circumstances. Would you talk to me a little bit about you talked a little bit about your back. I don't know if there was an injury or what happened, but I know you're somebody who seems like you are charging forward full steam ahead. So I can't imagine having something that stops you.
And 20 years ago, almost to this past June, 20 years, I'm a horsewoman. And we were riding out in a field going over fences, and I rode over a fence, and I have no memory of what happened, but the horse rolled on me. Now,
Wow.
so my husband was riding ahead of me, turned around, the horse was getting up, and I was on the ground.
Wow.
So he broke my back in two places, and they were compression fractures. And so I put on a body cast, and I had a neck brace because he chipped my neck, and I had a concussion. Let's tell you, concussions aren't pretty, and they're not simple. I mean, I couldn't drive for 6 months.
Yeah.
And memory was really weird. You'd be amazed how many checks you can write out for the wrong amounts, 5 zeros. But,
Wow.
but my clients, so I found a driver, and my clients didn't know how troubled I was. And I kept going. And I didn't get back on a horse for a year, but I got back on a horse, and my husband and I rode. And, the doctor said, well, you're going to stop riding. I said, well, it's a little like stop biking or stop walking down the stairs. Or, I mean, how many things will I stop doing? You're going to lock me in my room like a prison. And I've, unlike Christopher Reeves, poor gentleman, I have been blessed with, now, one of the things, as you and I were talking, that I thought I learned as I came out of the mist of post-traumatic stress, and I actually went into post-traumatic stress disorder counseling. And I found a coach who focuses on that and gave me all kinds of tapping things on the head to
Oh,
settle the
great.
brain down. It was very interesting and not great, but interesting. Um, I mean, you don't really want to do that, but I can appreciate the damage that the military has when they have IEDs explode and the concussions that happen.
Yeah.
Or the football players. I mean, this isn't your brain is important. But I began to recover. There's part of my memory that doesn't remember very well, but it's
Yeah.
enough so I do good. Um, but I learned that every day is a gift. And I can't say that often enough because what I began to realize as I woke up is that I have a purpose. And I have no idea exactly why I'm not on a ventilator like Christopher Reeves
Right.
and why I am walking. But I wore a body cast for 6 months and it was most interesting to 24 hours a day in a body
Wow.
cast. Yep. So you become humbled by the fragility of your
Yes.
body. But once you began to realize that you have a reason for being, and that you can't plan that bad luck moment. I've
No.
been writing since I'm 10, so I had lots of experience. We fox hunted for 25 years. We rode in England, we rode in Ireland, we rode in Latin America. I mean, we ridden in Africa. We went safari hunting on horses. You can get hurt. But
Right.
that's really not how to live life. You can always get hurt.
Yeah.
Um, but I do think if you can be bold and brave, you can really have a great time. But I realize that I also have a purpose. I got to be kind. What am I going to do to help somebody? How do I make that experience a lesson learned and something to really elevate your sense of mission? That there's something here that's important for you to do. So that
Yeah.
was that's a takeaway that came out of a not so nice experience.
I mean, that would be so frightening for somebody. Be, I think about you and your brain. And, here your mother is, tell me what you think and be an independent thinker. And it seems like the brain was just such an important part of your
Yes.
identity.
Hmm.
And then to have it not operating like you're used to having it operate, that was probably really scary.
It was. And it's also difficult for somebody to know that. So my husband, for
Yeah.
example, didn't know how I saw things,
Yeah.
and why I was thinking differently. Um, and the brain is really a cool thing, but you have to
It
take care
really
of
is.
it. It
You
is.
do. You do. Um, okay. So, Andy, you have written books.
Yeah.
You have worked for different types of companies. What books for you personally have been transformative?
Well, one is called the Medici effect. Trying to see if I have it here handy. I'll pull it down. The Medici effect is a wonderful book looking at what the Medicis did to open our minds to think outside of those
Mhm.
boxes. And I often found the Medici effect was I go back to it and read it occasionally to remind me about how do you see, feel, and think across things, not within them. What did the
Hmm.
Medicis do at a time where it wasn't easy to be, a seer or a viewer or a thinker? And how did they create a foundation for us as we're going through lots of changes? And I really like the Medici effect. Of course, I'm a blue ocean strategist, and Blue Ocean Strategy is a book that I fell upon. I had Montefiore as a client, Montefiore Medical Center, and my client there had fell upon the book. And he said, "This is a cool book. We should go listen to Renee Barbon talk about it. She's down at the Harvard Club." So I read the book and I met her in the elevator at the Harvard Club going up to her presentation. And I'm not bashful. And I said to him, "Renee, your book is fantastic. It's all very anthropological. It's all visual. It's all very grounded in the way in which we have to see things to change." The book was research based, and it was about which companies thrive. And what they found was they were different. They saw things differently. They were strategy mavens. They didn't stick to what they've always done. They saw new things coming and were able to create new markets, unmet needs, and non-users. Very, very. It's complicated and simple. But one of the things that she said to me, "You should be a blue ocean strategist." And I said, "What's that?" She said, "Oh, I have no idea. Let's make it up." And I said, "I can do that." And if there's a theme here, I like it when people say, "Can you be a consultant for a bank?" Sure. "Can you be a blue ocean strategist?" Why not? The door opens. You don't know what's on the other side. Sometimes it's not good, but lots of times in my life, it's been absolutely fascinating and not a straight line from here to there. And so, corporate anthropologist becomes a blue ocean strategist. It wasn't that far off. But I really do find that one woman at a group I was working with, I do a lot of public speaking, said, "I read the book in college and I had no idea what they were talking about. You finally let me see how to use it." I said, "Well, it's nice, it's interesting, but it's useful. It's a whole, particular idea."
Yeah.
So that's a really cool book that I enjoy. And then there's Homo Prospectus by Martin Seligman at Penn. And that's a book that talks about humans are futurists. And if you want to live today, you need to know where you're going. And so we create the illusion of knowing because we don't really know. And you can begin to think about that as you think about even what you're doing. My
Yeah.
my sense of change. If I can't see where I'm going, how am I going to live now to get there? And that becomes a very, fundamental part of the way in which you help companies and people change, knowing that they need to see the problem we have today is a lack of certainty makes people anxious. They don't
Right.
like ambiguity. They don't like to be betwixt and between.
Right.
And so in the absence of that, they're creating a fake or an illusionary kind of certainty.
Yes.
If they need something, am I going to invest or not going to invest?
Yep.
How will the tariffs affect my business or not affect my business? Who will buy? Who's going to shop? If so many people are losing jobs, where's my market going to be? All the uncertainties make a very unstable future for humans who want certainty and they want stability and they want to know that who they are and what they've done is static and not transformational and not going through transition. So those are three books, very different books that I find help me see the world in a different fashion and inspire me.
So, Andi, you're married to Andi.
I am.
Is Andi the same way? Like, is he that way that, somebody says, can you do this? And he says yes, and he is change oriented? Are you both built the same in that
Yes and
respect?
no. I mean, Andy's been a serial entrepreneur.
Hmm.
And so over the years, he was in corporate and, he had an executive position at Citibank and then wanted Bankers Trust. And he was executive at L'Oreal and at Norcliffe Thayer. And then he knew all through that he really wanted to be an entrepreneur. And at some point, we had a neighbor, he's passed away, and he and Andy began to talk about an educational test that he had. And Bert was a brilliant man, and the College Board was sponsoring the test called the Degrees of Reading Power. And Andy became the financial person on the company. And then, but in between the banks and this, he had a real estate company that was developing property in the Hudson Valley. And so it's hard to answer that question, but he's always looking for what to do. So he took, when his partner passed away, he became president of the company and grew it to be the fifth largest in the educational testing business, and then sold it to ETS before the pandemic. And then, because during the pandemic, no one went to school, no one took tests, everything was crazy.
Yeah.
And then he called and said, "I'm not retiring. I sold the company, but I'm joining yours." And he picked up a bunch of clients, built websites that he's never done before, does
Wow.
social media and blogs for a client, and he reinvents himself with great ease and joy. He's a
Yeah.
smart guy.
That's so fascinating to me because I just don't see you as the couple who's lying on the couch every day, popping Cheetos in your mouth and watching streaming
Well,
services,
there's always a little time for that, but not
Yes.
all.
Yeah.
It's not a bonbon all day long.
Right. Right. Okay. Lightning round. Random questions. So the question of if you could spend an evening with any three people, who would they be and why?
I think I'm going to be with my grandson, Michael, my granddaughter, Catherine, and my granddaughter, Lulu. They're 20, 19, and 16. And
And
those,
why?
why? Because I love them and I don't ever have enough time with them. And they are fun and they remind us that the future is in the hands of really wonderful youngsters who need a peaceful, prosperous country to, really thrive in. And
Yeah.
and they know no more than we know about what comes next. Um, but the challenges are challenges to who they are as well as what they're going to do. And I just find being with them, I just love it. And it's the one thing that I never get enough time for. My grandson spent 2.5 months with us this summer. He had an internship in New Jersey. And
Oh,
so he drove
wow.
down every day and it was a gift. It really is a gift to get to know them that way, to see
Yeah.
them in a different light. He was a good cook. He liked to cook. Who
Nice.
nice. And so those would be the three people I would enjoy spending time with.
That's beautiful. Um, okay, so where would you drop everything and go tomorrow? A place you love.
Africa.
Oh, interesting.
But I won't. But I love Africa. We've been there 3 times. Twice we were on horseback riding safaris, Botswana. And then from Botswana, we went to Zambia and Zimbabwe and South Africa. And then we were in Kenya on a safari, horseback riding safari, and we just loved it. You can't imagine what it's like to wrap your arms around a horse and go up close to Cape Buffalo, who are very dangerous, and pretend you're just a horse. And
Mm.
it was really amazing. And the third trip we took without horses, it was just the two of us and a guide. We went through Tanzania. And we went out to the Serengeti during the migrations, and we went to Olduvai Gorge, and we went up to the mountains and went to the Ngorongoro crater. And I just find us an interesting species. You go there, and there are 20,000 different animals, all kinds, and you ask God, "What are we doing here?" You know, they're not killing each other off. They're eating occasionally, but they have a different balance in nature, and we have disrupted it. And when you're there, you just I don't know, Jane Goodall, it was wonderful.
Yes.
Um, and I just think that Africa offers us a perspective on humanity, but also on ourselves and the kinds of stuff we love to do. And but we were going to go to Namibia when the pandemic hit, and I'm not quite sure we're going to head back there, but I would do that in a second. So
Oh,
that's my idea.
that is a really cool answer. What's your go-to when you need a reset?
Walk.
Mm,
Love to walk
yes.
without an iPad on my ears, without any music going through my hearing aids. Just walk.
Yeah.
And I used to walk my dog like that, but I've come to the point where I just like myself walking, just walking.
Yeah.
And walking, I find my brain quiets down.
Mhm.
It becomes comfortable in the moment. And that's a really cool part of every time I sit in this chair too long, I got to go walk.
Yeah. I'm similar. I'm similar. And I do leave my dog behind sometimes because she likes to sniff way too much.
Well, exactly, and I appreciate that. It's not why we're here. We're here to walk.
Yeah,
And
right.
then,
Right.
she says to me, "Oh, but it smells so good."
Right.
I say, "Well, that's a different walk. We can do that on your terms."
Exactly.
Fine.
Exactly. We squeeze both of them in. Um, what would, if anything, or what do people, if anything, get wrong about you?
It's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't even know how to begin to think about that. Um, I never asked them what do they get wrong about me. We don't ask very often. I'm
Yeah.
always honored when I'm included in things. I'm honored when I have a leadership role in something. Um, I don't really know. Maybe I'm just not willing to pay attention to it. And I'm not quite sure I want to know. It's sort of like life is complicated enough. Do I really have to?
Right. W- You know what? I mean, there's that famous kind of trite but true expression, which is, what people think of you is none of your business, you
I think
know?
that's great.
And it really is a comfortable way to approach life because,
What would I do to be different to make those who don't think well? And,
right.
and how much work would it take to do that? Change it, not knowing what it means, because remember, what they say isn't what they mean, and what they
Right.
say isn't what I hear. And
Right.
so they will say something perhaps, and I will hear it in a particular way and think that's what they meant, which may have nothing to do with what they meant at all.
So
I'm
true.
get away from that one.
So true. So if you could master any skill, what would it be?
Master any skill. Baking. Of
Nice. Are you
I
good at baking?
No, I've just started a new project. I'll give you the context. And it's an interesting question. We were in Scandinavia. We were in Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, and the bread in these hotels was extraordinary. Now, here in the States, I rarely eat bread. I don't find it particularly tasty, or I don't particularly like the texture. And so I said, I can cook that. And so I am starting to bake bread. So so I looked at YouTube and I got a perfectly lovely recipe and it was terrific. Today I tried to bake a different one. I figured I might as well try. It was terrible. I didn't even bake it. I couldn't get it to become the dough it was supposed to be. And I said, well, I'm not even going to play around with this dude. I threw it out. And then I went hunting for another YouTube video. There are 1,000 ways to make bread. And I'm not even looking at sourdough. I'm just looking for yeast and flour and oil and an egg and some salt and sugar and to study. It's like a science project.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the one that came out well, and I'm not going to worry about the one that didn't. And I'm going to
Yes.
do. But I like having something to do in the kitchen. Cooking is fine. I do a good job, but I'm really curious about bread. And I have a friend who is a wonderful baker, and she brings us bread all the time. And I'm a jealous person of that. That's the only thing I'm jealous of,
Yes.
um, because it's something I have not tried before. I certainly haven't mastered. And I wouldn't have thought that, can I master writing? Maybe someday. Can I master, podcasting? I try. Um, but mastering, can I get better at bread so that I don't struggle so much trying to figure it out, find my own pathway? I'm going to look at this and keep going because I find it fun, and it is like a science project.
Well, when you're talking, Andy, this is what happens to me. I am like, you know what? I'm gonna bake bread. I am gonna be here, and it's not going to happen. I can tell you because I have these grandiose dreams, but I can't stay in the kitchen for more than 5 minutes. I don't know why. It's just a thing with me. But I do remember my kids baked bread during the pandemic. They really got into it. Well, if I start doing it, I'll tell you, but I probably won't because my ambition is probably going to end at the end of our podcast. um, so my podcast is called Soulful Connections, and the larger umbrella organization I've created is called SolFuLiving. What does that word mean to you? When somebody says the word soulful, although it's spelled SOL, like my last name, Andy, but what does that mean to you?
you know, the um, to me, Amanda, knowing you for as long as I have, and watching you move from what you had been doing very well into something which I think is your passion and your purpose, is to bring soul, spirit, warmth, love, affection to people. And so I just think what you're doing is brilliant because it is you. It's your brand, it's your personal identity. It's something that you're using the podcast to share. This is more fun than fun. And you make it like it is personally inspiring for you to have these conversations. So that's what I think Soulful is about. Is that what it's about?
You did a great job of putting it into words, Andy. I asked you so that I could understand it myself because that that is really well articulated. See, I said at the beginning, you are so articulate, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate reading your books, watching what you're doing and how you're shaping the world. I love what you are doing to bring, I think, to really give a platform for all, but in particular for women. Lately, I think it's really, speaking of inspiring um, to see that. And I love hearing how you enter the world because you
Mm,
do it with confidence. From the moment where that person said, "Hey, would you consider this?" And you said, "Yes." Or you took this class in anthropology and thought, all right, I like this. This is what I'm doing. Getting back on a horse after you've been thrown. Many people have not and would not.
mm,
Going to Africa, let alone multiple times. These are big, adventurous things. And maybe we who are listening, um, do any of those things. But you give us an invitation to do our own thing, to say yes in our way. So thank you.
You said I'm articulate. You are brilliant. That was just lovely. I thank you as a wrap up for our conversation. You pulled it together, and I feel like this has been a soulful hour together, and I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Hey, thanks so much for listening. Thank you for being a valued part of the Soulful community. Thank you to William Aronson for writing, recording, and producing the Soulful Connections theme song. And finally, always know you're not alone. We are connected. We're all in this thing together. And You and your story are important. Let's just keep on connecting.